Welcome back, guys. Behavior Strategies for Class here. Today is the second in a series about self-regulation. So we're going to talk about brains in balance, understanding what is self-regulation. Next week is the third in the series, and that's going to be on how trauma affects self-regulation. Because you know some of the students you had from last year, some students you're going to get for next year, have been through some trauma and who may be still going through some traumatic events. And so you'll learn how that affects them being able to self-regulate. So listen in to today, guys, because you're not going to want to miss this. We're going to talk about helping your students manage their emotions, attention, and behavior because it's essential to their learning. And research shows when students build those self-regulation skills, they're more focused, they're more motivated, and more successful in your classroom. And who doesn't want that? So, understanding self-regulation is going to better equip you to help your students. So listen in, guys. Welcome to Behavior Strategies for Class. I am Diane Bachman, your behavior paraprofessional with over 15 years of experience working in special education. And I'm so glad you're here because I'll be teaching you about social emotional learning, behavior strategies, trauma-informed care, and more. So if you are tired of being frustrated and not knowing what to do with your students who have challenging and disruptive behavior, you're in the right place. Now, if you're ready to become more equipped to help your students learn and grow, let's listen in to today's episode. So remember, this podcast is here for you because we're about empowering educators with effective behavior management strategies that work. Guys, we want you to be successful in the classroom just as much as your students. So hit that subscribe button. Share this episode, this podcast with any other educators you know so that we continue to learn and grow from each other. Also, in the show notes, you can sign up for the email and stay up to date on lots of different things going on. And I'll be starting a new segment in the podcast, and that's answering your questions. So I want to hear from you. How can I better serve you? So you can contact me through Facebook, through LinkedIn, through my email, diane@behaviorstrategiesforclass.com. And I would love to be able to help you in that way. So send me whatever questions you may have regarding your students' behavior. So your students are going to continually learn and try their self-regulation strategies because they're going to constantly struggle with it, especially those who have never ever really had any control over themselves or their behavior, their words. And so, I think of especially our kinders. Our one kinder, man, he just could not control it. He wanted to run, he wanted to hit, he wanted to fight. He wanted to cuss you out. Another student just wanted to play all day or just wanted to also get in your space and yell at you and scream at you when he didn't want to do something. And so I really feel like this is super important, especially at the elementary level, because we're helping build that foundation for your students as they continue to grow and work through the school system. Right? They have middle school, high school, hopefully college, some type of other training. Obviously, this is a strategy, this is a skill, self-regulation skill that is going to help them throughout the rest of their life. And so it's going to be a constant skill that they need help with. Hopefully you see them getting better, and we've seen our students improve in this area. Some of our students, they're able just to vocalize and advocate for themselves on how they're feeling and know what they need to help themselves get back to learning. where some other students were just constantly reminding them and reteaching. So don't feel bad if you, even though you're doing these strategies or working through the skills or teaching them, that they're still not getting it. Like, don't give up. This is what they need. They need that constant reteaching. And so it is making a difference. And it is something your students need forever. So in this field of behavior, there are two theories about this brain-body connection. And one is by Jérémy SIGNORET-GENEST. Of course, I probably mispronounced that for sure. He is a German scientist who believed in the top-down processing. So from your brain to your body. Then there's Hisua Shen, who believed in bottom-up processing. That's body to brain. So this is still a debate in this field on how our body reacts, how our body can regulate and learn from the environment and our experience. And so I just wanted to give you a little bit of background because they did the research, they did the experiments to back up what they believe. So there is research and science behind the ability to self-regulate. So knowing, it's our whole body experience, whether it comes from our brain or it comes from our body and our reaction to the environment, it is still affecting your student and how they are able to react and yet get their bodies back in control and know that they don't have to be if you will, a slave to their emotions and how they feel, but that they can take back control of that. And all of this is connected. The brain, the internal bodies, and then their behavior. So there's a couple things here. So one is the impulse control. So we had one student, his impulse is constantly shouting out in the middle of class, just letting the teacher know he had some thoughts about certain things that she was teaching. Or another one who reacted just by hitting all the time. And that was just an impulse control. That's just what he had learned, and that was it. There's other impulse controls where we had one student, impulse reaction, right? They haven't learned control over that yet. So their impulse reaction, one of our students, he would elope from the classroom. He would run out. And he would run out and sometimes stay in the building. Other times he would run out and stay and go out of the school. Another student I have, his impulse was this heart-wrenching crying, screaming. He just could not cope. And granted, he was one of the tough ones who had been in the foster care system. We've had other students, like, their impulse, right, is to have a cry or to scream. Oh man, I've worked with a lot of students who just love to scream. And sometimes it's screaming out of anger. Sometimes it was screaming because they were sad. Sometimes it was screaming because they're trying to get your attention or because you're not hearing them, where is what they think. Like, we obviously can hear you as you're screaming in my face. Thank you. So lots of different impulses that students have. You have other impulses of students who steal things, snatch things, eat. We had a student with pica, which means they had that sensory. They always had to have something in their mouth, and it didn't matter what it was. It could be rocks, it could be metal, it could be, an entire pencil. It could be anything in their mouth, and that was a tough one. I had another student who had an impulse of just grabbing food, whoever's food it was. If he saw the food out, man, he shoved it in his mouth so fast, like there was no way to stop him. So, your students have a lot of different impulses. And so that impulse control is where you want to teach them how to pause before reacting. So with some of our students, we would have a behavior chart where they would earn their scores for the day if they kept those impulses under control. So like our one student that always wanted to lash out or speak out of turn, speak out, or not raise their hand, waiting for the teacher. We wanted to motivate him by giving him that motivations to meet his goal for the day. And so that was one way that we helped teach him that. Another way you can teach that is by using a social story. Giving the example, how does this really work? And even though, of course, he's in the classroom, he sees it, but just showing them again through a story, a social story, and how that truly may affect those around them. Those social stories are really helpful, and you can find them anywhere, online. You can create your own. There's all kinds of ways you can get a social story. So self-regulation. What is self-regulation? So again, it is recognizing your emotional state and helping reduce the intensity and frequency of those strong reactions. So this also is where impulse control comes under that self-regulation, right? So they're learning to pause. How am I feeling? I really want to punch that kid in the throat, but maybe that's not the best idea. Giving them a moment, teaching them to take a moment before they react. And this really does get better over time. So even though you are constantly reteaching this, they really do learn, but it does take time. And so their reactions kind of lessen as they continue to learn about this. So we had one student who would run out of the classroom, a different student who ran out of the classroom. And it got to be less and less as we taught them strategies on how to stay in class even when they felt uncomfortable or upset or frustrated. So that really comes back to, again, that teacher connection as well, because when your students feel comfortable enough in your classroom, knowing that you care about them, then they're more likely to come up to you and let you know, I'm frustrated, I don't understand this, or why was this done, or whatever it was, that they have that freedom to come up to you because they know they're safe. They know, there's no major consequence to how they're feeling, right? We want to validate how they're feeling and then help them process through that. And so there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. But you ultimately want them to pause before they react, recognize how they're feeling, which helps reduce the intensity and frequency of those strong reactions, right? Those impulses when they feel that need to lash out at somebody, when they feel that need, I got to get out of here, and they're running out of the room without telling anybody where they're going or what's going on. So this is really important because if they can't get it together, per se, right? Be able to get their bodies back in a calmer state, they're never going to be able to learn, right? They're never going to be able to focus and be engaged in your class. So a couple ways that you can help your students learn these self-regulation skills. One is teaching them how do they manage stress. Teach them how to manage stress. So that's one of the things that we've done with our students. We call it processing with them. So there's been maybe a fight with the teacher, or to where they hit the teacher or they threw something at the teacher. And we have removed them from their gen ed class, and now they're back in our room. And usually we give them at least 5 minutes to calm down. And then we're able to talk with them about what happened. What is something else they could have done? Or how do you think that made your teacher feel? Just realizing the effects of their impulses has on those around them, right? It's teaching them their consequence to those around them and teaching them to take responsibility for what happened. And then what can they do differently next time? So next time, if your teacher doesn't call on you and you've been holding your hand up, to them, it seems like forever, but it may have been like less than a minute. How can they better handle that? So what's another way, and we don't give them the answers. We're asking them the questions. We want them to think for themselves on ways that will help them, right? We sometimes will give them suggestions. We want to give them some options on what they think. But if they come up with something else that they think will help them, then we want them to do that, right? But if it's not working, then we kind of come back to the drawing board, per se, and process with them, have that conversation, giving them that voice in their own behavior, right? So what are some ways that you can teach them how to manage stress? I always come back to the breathing, because breathing has helped me, taking those deep breaths, getting to a quiet place, a calming place. And so that again goes to, do you have a place in your classroom where your students can go? Do they know they can go sit in that corner for a minute, take a breath, look at the, beach posters on the wall, read a book, play with a fidget, whatever it is you have in there, that they can take that moment to kind of center, calm down, and then get back to their learning. That is really so valuable, and it's super exciting to see more and more classrooms setting that up, because I believe you guys are realizing it really is an asset to have in your classroom. So another way you can teach self-regulation for your students is that reflection. So, right, this is telling you, the impulse control talks about pausing before reacting. Self-regulation includes recognizing, how do you really feel right now? So reflecting on how they feel. Of course, that's not easy, right? When they're mad and they're ticked off and it's taken them a while to calm down. 5 minutes may not do it. And we usually will ask our students, are you ready to talk? And, a lot of the times we get no. I need a couple more minutes. Or not yet. Or I need more space. And so we have to honor that, because we want to be able to process with them. We want them to be able to reflect on what happened, how they were feeling, how can they address it better maybe the next time, that situation comes up. So another way that they can have an opportunity to reflect on their feelings and how they can be better in recognizing how they feel is by journaling. A lot of students love this. And this, of course, is a great habit also for them to pick up on, because, being able to reflect, setting goals, a gratitude journal, all of these things are super important also for your student to learn. And so I want to tell you that I created the student behavior journal because I know the value of journaling for your students. And so the journal that I created has areas in there that students can draw sometimes drawing how they feel is easier, especially for the little ones that may not have, their writing abilities really well. And we've gotten some pretty kind of scary pictures from some of our students, heartbreaking pictures from our students when they were able to reflect and take a moment. And then there's also space to write in this journal. There's a place for them to set a daily behavior goal. I know some of your students are on IEPs and they may already have like 3 goals that you're working on. They may have, a behavior chart that you give them. And so that is great. Obviously, they need that. But in the journal, they can write their own behavior goal just for that day. Because I know sometimes for your students, it's overwhelming to think of, okay, I gotta work on this all week. Or, that's too many goals for them to think of at that moment. So being able to focus on what is one behavior goal they can work out. And so maybe one is, I'm not going to hit, Johnny 5 times today. Or I'm going to stay in class, as long as I can. Or I'll only run out of the class twice today. I don't know. Whatever it is, this helps them to reflect on themselves, what they think they can work on. It, again, gives them that voice, that responsibility, that accountability for themselves. There's also a gratitude section in the student behavior journal that I created that gets them thinking, what am I thankful for today? We want to also change their thinking, change their, get that positive thinking in there as well. It's so easy, as we all know, to focus on the negative and, feel bad for themselves. And now they're frustrated because, some of your students, like, they're the hardest people on themselves, right? Sometimes we don't have to say anything. They already feel so bad because they made a mistake or, they hurt somebody and they really didn't mean to. So giving them a chance to say, what, I have done this. I'm thankful I can do this. And then there's also a spot where they can chart how they're feeling that day. So it's just a daily journal that they can check in with themselves, or maybe when you have a time where they can sit quietly, then they can journal and get that down. Maybe it's the beginning of the day that you give them that opportunity. We had one teacher I worked with that every day she actually had a writing journal prompt on the board and had her students write about whatever the prompt was. But just getting in the habit, right, of reflecting on something is really important for your students. So again, the student behavior journal has those daily activities for your students, and you can find that on Amazon, and the link is in the show notes. So another way that they can reflect on their feelings is getting that quiet time. We are in a busy, crazy, go world today. We have entertainment at our fingertips that we have in our hands constantly. I'm the same. Like, I find myself scrolling for really no apparent reason. And then it's like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? I really should be doing something else. So being able to sit and be quiet is a great skill to have as well. I think I was like more in my adult years when I finally felt comfortable just sitting and not doing anything. I'm a reader and I love to read, so I would usually just sit and read. And it was such a refreshing time. It still is. I still love to read. And just sitting and reading is really a great skill, like I said, for your students to be able to just sit and not think of the 5 million things, not always having to talk to their neighbor, not always having to ask you questions every 2 seconds, but being able just to sit is a super exciting skill for your students. And I really think that is valuable for them because they really do come away refreshed. They really do come away ready to be focused. Of course, they don't always realize that's what they're doing, but they are, and so that is super important for your students as well. So again, teaching your students impulse control is integrated with self-regulation, helping them to recognize their emotional state, how are they feeling, helps them to reduce the intensity and frequency of those strong reactions that they have. And that's to their environment, from their experience. Because like I said, you may have, and I'm going to dive deeper next week, but just a little blurb as far as, students that have been through traumatic experiences, their go-to is to react to what they have always been through, right? What has always helped them to survive. So teaching them there's another way to react, to come back, to get control is super important for those students, of course, as well as all of your students. So a couple ways that you can teach your students self-regulation skills is by teaching them how to manage stress. How do they manage it? A couple of the ways I thought of is listening to music, hanging out with their friends, talking with their friends, talking to an adult, a trusted adult. Those are some other ways that your students can learn how to manage stress. Because for me, that's totally the same. I want to talk to my friends. I want to, go hang out with them. As a believer, I also want to pray. I want to read my Bible. This helps reduce my stress. So giving them some of those options on how they can use those strategies to reduce stress and to calm their bodies. And so another way that you can teach self-regulation is by helping them to reflect on their feelings, giving them time to journal, giving them quiet time, a quiet space in your classroom. Those are really two great ways that you can teach your students the skill of self-regulation. So are you going to be ready to do that for next year? I want to leave you with this quote. Sometimes we hear that children aren't yet ready for self-regulation, but that's just not how the brain-body works. There is no readiness. There is only now. And that is by Susan Hopkins. And that's the truth, right? Your students don't hit one certain age and we're like, okay, now's a good time. We're going to teach you how to control yourself, how to self-regulate, right? It's a constant. It's something we're really starting from toddlers, right? When they're moving around and they start touching things that they should not be touching, that's going to hurt them. And so we're teaching them that impulse control from a young age. And so it's super important to know, yes, there's research and science behind this because our bodies are amazing, right? God created our bodies in an amazing way where, our minds and our thoughts help control our behavior and from our experience in the environment and how that all just ties together for the whole body reaction. And the ability that you have to influence your students' behavior in a positive way and teaching them and modeling for them what self-regulation looks like. Right? Because I'm sure there's lots of times during the day where You may want to lose it, but you can't, right? You're the teacher, you're the adult. You are the role model for your students. So how are you managing stress? How are you reflecting on your feelings and what you're going through? Knowing all of your body ties together. It really is all connected. And as you learn more with yourself and these skills, you are able and better to teach them to your students. Because again, you know the self-regulation skill is a skill that they need for life, right? Just like everything else you're teaching them. So you guys are amazing. And I hope you are being refreshed and restored this summer break, as I know you all are probably still working and learning. But I also want to remind you, next week is the third in the series about self-regulation, and it is about how trauma affects self-regulation. So guys, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your continued support. And again, I want to hear from you. Send in your questions. I'm going to start a new segment on answering your questions. And I want to encourage you to continue to be the best teacher that you can be, because your students need you. We all need you. And I will see you next week. Thanks so much for listening. I truly appreciate your support. And if I have encouraged you, motivated you to continue to learn, to support your students, even better, to help them strive in your classroom, please leave a review, hit that subscribe button so that others can see they can learn and grow here as well. Thank you.